Ha 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 ha. Welcome to Fabe Facts, where we talk about a bunch of crazy shit you probably didn't know. The human-animal bond. A pet could be defined as any animal kept by humans for the purposes of companionship and pleasure. But the relationship that has developed over thousands of years goes far beyond that. They need us. We need them too. Members of the animal kingdom have shaped the history of mankind, from Laika, the stray mutt who became an involuntary space pioneer, to the monkey whose fateful bite set off a chain of events that might have resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths during World War II. It's not just a story of how animals were domesticated. It's how they've changed us, and we've changed them. The relationship between pets and their humans is a symbiotic one. At first it was strictly utilitarian. Dogs, for instance, could run faster than humans and have stronger jaws, making them useful for hunting. In exchange, dogs gained a reliable food supply, protection from other wild predators, and a place by a warm fire. Mutual respect and affection naturally followed. Some monarchs so adored their pets they made them virtual nobles. Some had their own designated human servants. Although dogs, or more specifically wolf cubs, are widely believed to have been the very first wild animals to be trained and domesticated, other animals followed: cats, horses, birds of prey, and more. We selectively bred them to have specific traits. Pets have been featured in art, stories, religion, and myth. The early Christian church, however, was called to the practice of keeping pets, believing the food they were given would be better off going to poor humans. Do you have a pet? Look into its eyes. What is it saying besides, "Feed me"? Although we have made progress in studying and explaining animal behavior, the mystery of the bond between humans and animals is perhaps an enhancement to it. These tales from history tell the story of humans, with animals reliably by their sides, and how over time that relationship turned from one of mutual survival to one of love and shared lives. Taming the Beasts, 5000 BCE through 300 CE. Although there is some disagreement among scholars as to exactly when and how humans began domesticating wild animals, over a period of thousands of years, dogs, cats, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, cattle, and horses were adopted and adapted by humans for a variety of purposes. Dogs. Wolves to dogs pet keeping was very popular in the Paleolithic period and, in fact, it might have been the very first necessary step in modern pet keeping, according to James Serpell, professor of animal ethics and welfare at the University of Pennsylvania and author of In the Company of Animals, a study of human-animal relationships. During the most recent Ice Age some 20,000 or more years ago, bison roamed throughout much of the earth. They were largely invulnerable to attack from most animals, aside from a bear or mountain lion occasionally attacking a youngling or an old bison. There were two exceptions: humans and wolves. Over time, humans and wolves, both much smaller than bison, developed social systems to hunt in packs. These systems were remarkably similar. At the top of the hierarchy was the alpha male, followed by a dominant female as his top lieutenant. They protected their young, were suspicious of or hostile to outsiders, and grew to interpret emotions among them through body language and facial expression. It's possible, if not probable, that the first wolves to seek human protection were orphaned cubs. The Hollywood film, Alpha, offers a different narrative, one in which an injured human hunter befriends an injured wolf. As the cubs grew into adulthood, they remained subordinate to humans, respectful of their place in the hierarchy. A once feared animal, a carnivore competing for the same food as humans, became our protector and friend. And all this happened thousands of years before humans developed written languages. That's one theory, and it's bolstered by what anthropologists call the cute response, our instinctual need to nurture babies. So, a small, furry, big-eyed wolf cub that has lost its mother wanders into proximity to humans and is taken in. But it's highly unlikely the process was that tidy. Studies of wolf cubs and dog puppies put under human care and given the same treatment mature very differently. Puppies become dogs. Wolf cubs initially act puppy-like before becoming wolves and producing more wolves. That is, The wolf cubs were tamed for a time but not domesticated, while the puppies were. There's a presumption built into this view, which is that humans, who had never domesticated any other animal, believed they could turn wolves into something else. As demonstrated in the previously cited example, that simply doesn't work. What could instead have happened, over generations, is that the bolder wolves approached human encampments or settlement in search of food scraps. Proximity to humans had its own hazards, but it was easier than hunting in the wild. Those bold wolves bred more bold wolves that learned similar behaviors, making them more likely to survive and breed even more wolves with that tendency. The less adaptable or sociable ones were likely killed or driven off. That's natural selection at work. Animals that adapted to their environment were more likely to survive and reproduce. As we see time and again, however, the relationship was not one-sided. Humans who kept these animals to carry loads or hunt may have outcompeted their dog-less neighbors for ever more scarce resources. From the start, humans got something out of the bargain, even if it was, in a pinch, dinner. The animals had to adjust as well. They had to adjust to a new diet. Wild wolves take almost all their nutrition from meat, and to perpetuate their genetic lines they had to successfully reproduce in captivity or something like it. From these first wild companions, every single species of domesticated dog evolved. That would have been a revelation to Charles Darwin, who tried and failed to pinpoint the precise origin of the dog. But Darwin didn't have DNA analysis, which shows all dogs have 99.9% of their DNA identical to grey wolves, be they Chihuahuas or Great Danes. Coyotes come in second, sharing 99.3%. By comparison, humans, chimpanzees, and bonobos are 98.8% identical in any event. Humans observed that when their four-legged companions with desirable physical and emotional traits, speed and endurance, obedience, or at least a lesser tendency to bite, bred, they produced similarly desirable offspring. In just a few generations of selective breeding, humans began to alter the wolf into what they found most desirable or useful, with benefits for both species. The pick of the litter was prized breeding stock. What humans learned in these practices, they would incorporate as other animals were domesticated. If we accept the evidence that the first recognizable dogs emerged around 12,000 years ago, that would roughly coincide with the rise of agriculture, the transition from humans being hunter-gatherers to being farmers and traders. Dogs could have been used to keep herbivorous nuisance animals away from the valuable crops and, in their time off, prove themselves even better company for humans. What is known is that dogs eventually engaged in what's called self-domestication, in which the friendliest dogs gained an upper hand over problematic animals. The friendly and trusting dogs were better able to pick up on cues from humans. In a sense, dogs domesticated themselves as much as we domesticated them. These behavioral changes coincided with physical ones. We will talk about the Siberian silver fox experiment later in the video. Contemporary studies also suggest there's a hormonal reason for the unique bond. When humans and dogs gaze at one another, the brains of both secrete feel-good oxytocin, the same hormone that bonds parents and children. This is the only known instance of the phenomenon happening between different species. Make sure you like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Descendants of wolves. From the Great Dane to the tiny Chihuahua, the modern dog descended from the grey wolf, and has been evolved by humans into more than 150 different breeds. With the existence of so many different types of dogs, it's easy to forget they belong to the same species. Primitive dogs. Pets to the ancient pharaohs. These primitive breeds are the closest relative to the ancient wolf. Some of the breeds can't bark, but they can howl and create other melodic sounds. Unlike modern dogs that can have 2 liters of pups each year, primitive dogs can only have 1. Mountain dogs and mastiffs. Powerful mountain dogs were bred as protectors and rescuers, and are less agile than herding dogs. Mastiffs are a different kind of guardian. While most were simply enormous working dogs, some were developed to be warriors and fighting dogs. Many of the breeds are massive, but some, like the bulldog, are small and stout muscular dogs. Herding dogs. these super intelligent working dogs have an instinct to herd cattle and sheep. Although they have been bred in a variety of shapes and sizes, the differences in how these pastoral dogs look is due to the regions, terrains and climate where they were developed, rather than the job they were bred to do. Spitz-type dogs. Many of these East Asian breeds, with their double-layer coats, originated in the Arctic and Siberia. Bred to pull sleds, some breeds can run more than 125 miles in a day, whiteout conditions. As they run, their tireless bodies area sensitive enough to detect and avoid crevices and ice beneath the snow surface. Intentional evolution. The Siberian silver fox experiment. Domestication can only happen over long periods through selective breeding. But because the first humans who domesticated animals are long dead, it's impossible to ask them how they did it. Groundbreaking and long-running research in Siberia offers intriguing clues. The story begins in 1959 in Novosibirsk, Siberia's largest city. Geneticist Dmitry Belyaev suspected that Stone Age peoples would have selected animals based on their ability to be tamed, and he embarked on a study to disavow or confirm his suspicion. In a study involving wild Siberian silver foxes for his first generation of fox parents, Belyaev selected 100 vixens and 30 males, opting for those that tolerated human touch and rejecting any that showed aggression or defensiveness against humans. The foxes lived outside in cages. When the first generation of cubs were born, Belyaev and his team fed them by hand and attempted to pet them for consistent periods. Other than that, they had little contact with humans. The goal was not to train the foxes but to select distinctive behaviors. If the cubs show any aggression or fear, they were removed from the experiment. In each subsequent breeding, fewer than 10% of the tame foxes were used to produce the next generation. By just 4 generations of intensely selective breeding, the team began to see extraordinary and unexpected changes. Cubs began to act like dogs. They whimpered, licked researchers, and wagged their tails when they saw humans. They actually sought out contact with humans, just as dogs would do. After 9 years, the tamest of the foxes stopped looking like wild foxes, developing dog-like physical traits: floppy ears, curly tails, shorter, more rounded snouts, and spotted fur. And more, they acted like dogs. They read nonverbal human cues, responded to gestures and hearing their names, and even barked. They looked into the eyes of humans, which wild foxes rarely if ever do. After less than a decade of breeding, they looked as much like dogs as foxes. Equally important, they had more serotonin, a feel-good hormone like oxytocin, and lower levels of stress hormones such as cortisol. By the 2000s, almost all the foxes were tame and able to respond to cues. By then, the farm was home to some 3,000 foxes. More than 50 generations had been bred there. Arguably, the fruits of the silver fox experiment have contributed more to our study of evolution than any other single researcher since Charles Darwin himself, back in the day. Ha 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 ha. Like and subscribe for more. You know you want to.